Inflation has never really sounded like a good thing. I think most of us will agree. The general raising of prices makes everything sound like we'd be losing purchasing power. And while that's true, you also have to consider that inflation affects everything, which includes wages and income as well. Meaning that if prices are going up, wages are technically going up as well. Now, the biggest thing about this is that it's going to deal with more nominal versus real. That's right, baby. It's back. So while the raising of prices doesn't necessarily cost anything due to the increase in wages, there is a little bit that you have to consider. There are 3 types of cost commonly associated with inflation. The first type is shoe leather cost. Shoe leather cost is the cost associated with dealing with inflation. At any given time, having money in your wallet or in your pockets, it's not increasing at the same rate as inflation is, right? But shoe leather cost is the cost associated with trying to counteract that, which would include things such as the fee you have to pay in order to buy stocks. The type of cost is the menu cost, or the cost associated with changing the prices of an item. Coming, of course, from restaurants with menus, it's found in all types of industries, including supermarkets, where, especially at times of super high inflation, the constant changing of prices represents an actual economic burden for the company. Now, this isn't to say that menu costs don't exist in low inflation economies too, but with the lower inflation, menus only have to be changed once, twice a year, meaning that it costs much less, and it's much less time and money spent on dealing with the changing prices. The final price associated with inflation is unit of account costs. These are associated with the uncertainty that comes from the changing prices. When the constant changing of prices leads people to make less sound financial decisions, which causes them to quite often miss out. This isn't making coherent sense, is it? Okay, give me a brief second. We're gonna come over here. We're gonna park. Unit of costs of inflation are the costs arising from the way inflation makes money a less reliable unit. One big example for this is phantom gains, where a company might purchase a parcel of land. Let's say it's a very small parcel of land, so $10. And the next year, they try to sell that land for $11. Well, due to inflation, technically, they didn't make any money on that sale, correct? Because the price rose with the rising inflation. However, the government sees that extra dollar as income from the sale, as capital gains from the sale, and so will tax them for that dollar that they earned. This leads to these phantom gains because technically they didn't gain anything. With all things, there are winners and losers for inflation. This tends to happen in cases of loans or debt, where constantly loans are put in states of nominal terms over the course of many years. Remember, nominal being now, nominal being the big rate, right? So you have to take the nominal rate, which equals the real rate plus the rate of inflation. So effectively, if a bank charges 10% interest and inflation is at 2% for that year, then technically the bank is only making 8% on their sale, because the 2% is just keeping their money up with inflation. A couple of quick terms I want to make sure I go over. Inflation, increase in prices. Deflation, decrease in prices. Disinflation, a decrease in inflation. That's right. Disinflation is when inflation decreases, but not enough to turn it into actual deflation. Disinflation. Fun new word. Simple way that we monitor inflation is through the use of market baskets and consumer price index. I've stopped the car for a while. Just driving around in circles for 2 hours is getting a little exhausting. I'm just gonna lean back here. We're gonna do just a little bit of economics here. How does that sound? I don't really care how it sounds to you. This is what I'm doing. I'm in a car. That's the premise. The premise was I was in a car talking about economics. And I am. Deal with it. So, there are a lot of times different things that we're going to group together in the market, which we'll group together as market baskets. So, you have, let's say, oranges, grapefruits, and lemons. All fruits produced in Florida, correct? I'm going to take my seatbelt off. I'm not driving. It's safe, kids. Anyway, so market baskets. Market baskets are used because looking at the individual prices for each good would make it much too confusing. So by grouping together in the market basket, we can look at the average price and kind of get the average prices for those goods. The market basket allows us a more holistic look at the economy at a much easier rate. So, I mentioned consumer price index. Well, the consumer price index is going to be the current market basket, or the market basket of any given year, compared to the market basket of your base year. Yes, this is still along the lines of GDP. So you are still, that man walking his dog is giving me the weirdest look, because I'm sitting in my car. I'm not next to a fire hydrant, am I? No, I'm good. Okay. So, GDP, you still have the base year, right? It's like real GDP, because you're comparing it all to the base year. So you take the market basket of the year you're looking at over the market basket of the base year, gives you, times 100, gives you your consumer price index. So, or your price index, not necessarily consumer price index. It's consumer price index when you're doing consumer goods with it, which is what you usually do. Whatnot. So, what we're looking at is market baskets. So, let's say you were looking at the base year, right? So you have the year that you're looking at, which is going to be, let's say 15. Let's say that's the market basket for that year. It wouldn't ever be that low, but it's easy. 15 divided by the market basket of the base year, which is also 15. So you get 1 times 100 gives you 100. That means that that year is your base year. Now that is correct. Every time you look at the base year for your price index, you're going to get 100 as your answer. Index makes it easy to compare prices from where they were in the base year to where they are in your current year, because it allows you to take 100 versus whatever the other number you get, and that's your rate of increase. If you go from 100 to 186, 186 is your rate of inflation, right? Now, sometimes the AP test, this is a little AP trick for all you guys out there, sometimes the AP exam will ask you to compare 2 years that neither one is your base year. So you're going to want to know new minus old divided by old. That is your equation times 100. That is going to be your equation for percent increase or percent decrease, which is going to give you that comparison of your price indexes. Price index comparison, where you have new minus old divided by old, is what's going to give you your inflation rate, but only when you do it with 2 consecutive years. Now we're at consumer price index. The consumer price index is the cost of all purchases by the typical urban family. It's simple market basket. Just kidding. It's a very complicated market basket. It's very simple because we make it a market basket. However, the market basket, the consumer price index, is used as it's used to determine the health of the economy, but I'd argue it's probably not used as much as your big 3, GDP, unemployment, inflation. Now, the consumer price index is what measures inflation, which is why it's not quite as important. 2 other price measures that are used with inflation, which I'm just going to stick in this video because I don't think it's worth creating a whole new video for it. But you have the producer price index, or the wholesale price index, which is basically the cost of the typical baskets of goods, the raw commodities, steel, electricity, coal, purchased by the producers that produce the products, right? When they perceive the change in overall demand for goods, they're going to buy more of their base goods. So this producer price index is going to increase. It's just another market basket that you can look at to kind of get that rate, but not as commonly used as the consumer price index for calculating inflation. The other price measure that we use is the Gdp Deflator. It's basically 100 times the rate of the nominal GDP over the rate of the real GDP for that year. As you using base prices, because you have real GDP included in there, and when you're doing the comparison for the base year, your real GDP and your nominal GDP are going to be the same. So you're going to get 1 for that ratio times 100. So once again, 100 is going to be your base year. It's a bit like the market basket, but it's not technically a market basket. The big thing to remember about the things for these 3 measures is that they typically move together, and that while the producer price index fluctuates more because it's based more on speculation of businesses, it's really going to be pretty close for all of them. So they can all be used fairly equally. I think we, for the most part, understand that. That's inflation for you. Inflation, which can be calculated through the 3 price measures, the consumer price index, the producer price index, and the GDP deflator. There are those equations that you're going to want to remember. You can always look those up to find them, because me just saying them to you probably didn't give you the best image. You're going to definitely want to look those up, add them to your study guide and everything. But for now, this is Duncan Fox, driving away into AP Economics.